Now, Rick, let's talk about maybe the reaction when you eventually did come out. Because one thing we never look at is we have time to build up the courage to think about what we want to say, headline our thoughts, and then hit our parents, our family members with it. But they get hit with this all at once. And they're not really preparing for it. What was it like for you when you came out, first of all, to your family?
You know, when I told my mother I was gay, I always tell the story, even though she always says, never tell that story. I said, I told her I was gay, and she said, oh, we always thought your brother was gay.
What?
So then I immediately called my brother. I said, well, I told Mom I'm gay. Guess what she said? Because I always had a hot girlfriend. So they weren't worried about me at all.
And what was your brother's reaction?
Well, you know, he was... I don't know if he found it. He didn't like it when I told that story on Strombolopolis one night.
Oh, I think that's
He's
awesome.
Like, that's the story you had to tell?
Of all stories, and you tell that story about your brother.
Yeah.
Now, what about friends, family, coworkers?
You know, again, it's so funny. I was thinking about a buddy of mine sent me, Andrew Younghusband, who hosts Canada's Worst Driver. He sent me a note after the rant, and he was one of the first guys I told, because he was, you know, we were best of friends back then, and we had a comedy troupe together and stuff, and I can remember it being such a huge deal. And if you'd asked me then that, oh, and then someday you'll be on the radio talking about it, I just never would have ever imagined in a million years that could happen. But yet, here we are. You know, it was a big deal, but it was generally met with a collective shrug. Like, no one really cared.
Yeah.
And Andrew probably thought, oh, so like, I don't have to worry now because, like, more chicks for me. I mean, I don't know what. He certainly wasn't concerned. And, you know, I've had friends who've had to come out, and, I mean, my advice has always been, like, the vast majority of people I know, their families, sometimes they react poorly initially, and you know what, you got to let them do that because, you know, it comes as quite a shock to them.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the we don't really, they don't really prepare for it. We do.
Generally, my experience has been, you know, most people have, you know, it's worked out okay. I mean, I certainly know there's some horror stories out there, but yeah, it was kind of a collective shrug. And even now, I mean, you know, in the rant, I didn't mention that I was gay, and perhaps I should have. I think it's a valid criticism, but I kind of thought, well, I'm out. And I also think gay people know I'm gay, and it's not a point that I have to make over and over again. But it's interesting, like, then you go like, well, you're out, and people go, well, you know, you're a hypocrite. You're not out. I'm like, it was in the Globe and Mail. It was. My mother certainly saw it.
It was in the Globe and Mail, Fab magazine. It was on TV, CBC.
Yeah, you know, and I understand it. I understand some in the gay media as well. You know, I had a guy suggest that, you know, I wasn't out, and I said, well, I was on the cover of your magazine.
What more can I do?
I don't know. I was on the cover.
But that is a valid question, because I've talked to people in our community. For example, the executive director of the Rainbow Resource Center, Chad Smith, he said to me, he says, why didn't Rick take it just a step further and say, as a gay man in the rant?
Well, you know what? It didn't really cross my mind, and I'm not saying that as a cop-out. But in hindsight, if I had to perform the same rant again, I don't think I would have done it necessarily, because one thing I do know is that any time you do anything where, you know, like I'm at the Pride Parade and I'm interviewed or something, and, you know, and I mention that I'm gay or whatever, there is always this reaction, I didn't know you were gay, I didn't know you were gay. And that is in part because, you know, I have like 1.5 million viewers every week, and people just, no matter what happens, they go, oh, I didn't know that. And had I done that, I think in hindsight, it probably would have torqued the story and torqued the rant a bit, and it would have been like, Mercer comes out after death of kid, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm glad that didn't happen, because I'm glad the conversation didn't go there. I mean, again, I don't mind that there's a debate about it. I don't mind, and it's mostly in the gay media, and I don't mind, and I certainly understand it. And I kind of, like I say, I think the criticism is somewhat valid.
But I think I like what you're introducing to us here. Maybe just be more visible.
Well, and, you know, again, and there's nothing wrong with the flag waving. You know what I mean? It's like people who are gay activists. I mean, I enjoy all sorts of freedoms and privileges today because there were and are gay activists, right? But I think just being visible, like when I was growing up, I didn't know any gay people, for starters, but I do remember this. I remember there was a guy in Newfoundland who's very well known. Let's say he was a morning radio call-in host guy, even though he wasn't. But he's the type of person that, you know, in a community where everyone knows who this person is, like they're, you know, whether you're 10 years old or 80 years old, you just know, right? They're a fixture in the community. And I can remember in like grade 10, a friend of mine saying, you know, so-and-so lives up the street. And I said, really? He lives on your street? And they said, he's married to a dude. And I was like, really? And that was probably the first time I ever heard the idea of a guy being married to a guy. He's like, yeah. And I said, really? And they live on your street? And they lived on the most suburban street ever. And he's like, yeah, because they come over like for potlucks occasionally, like with mom and dad. And just that alone, I thought, wow, a guy like that who's like respected and has a job and everyone knows him, and then what everyone on the street knows, and he shows up for potlucks. I mean, it resonated with me, you know, and I guess that's what I'm saying. You know, it just wouldn't hurt if people were a bit more visible.
Now, how important do you think it was to today's gay youth to legalize same-sex marriage in Canada?
I think it was a tremendous step forward. I mean, that was the civil rights, battle for gays of that generation. I think it also I wouldn't say it puts pressure, but one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, people in high school, maybe this is why they're coming out. Like, they know that there are gays. Gays walk among us. Whereas, like I said, when I was in high school, someone said, "Go away, you're gay," or whatever, as an insult. I don't know if they actually believe that the person might actually be gay. Whereas kids today know, obviously, there's probably a good chance that person is, or someone in the school is, and because of the advancements like gay marriage, what you see in pop culture. But I think pop culture is somewhat like 10 years ahead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it puts a lot of pressure on kids. Like, I wouldn't tell a kid to come out in high school, really. That's not my place to tell a kid to come out in high school. And, that's not what I'm doing. It's interesting, though. I think there's a lot of pressure on kids that pressure wasn't there when I was in school.
I think when you're dealing with the internet, smartphones, Facebook, all that, it's very tough to get away when you're a target nowadays. But maybe not necessarily asking kids to come out in high school. It's more of making it okay if they do want to.
Well, of course, that is it, right? That's why I would never tell a kid he has to come out. And you know what? I've talked to my cameraman Don. I mean, we were talking about this, and he said, his son, who's now 22, 23, said, his friend came out in grade 8. I said, really?
Wow.
He said, yeah, he came home. He told me, he said, so-and-so, he's gay. And I was like, really? And he said they hung out all through high school, and they went to school together, and they're still buddies and all that business. And I said, well, was he hassled? And he said, well, not to my knowledge. I mean, my son's popular, and they hung out together, and they had a big gang of friends, and he had a pretty good relationship with his son. He said, I think I'd know if that kid was in trouble, and no, he never seemed to be. So I think, a lot of schools and a lot of environments, I think that the kids are okay.
So what do you think, in maybe just your opinion, with the whole bullying and that it is tougher to avoid if you are a target, what do you think is the one thing that probably has to change nowadays in schools to maybe avoid these teen suicides?
Well, I know one thing. I know I never bullied anyone in school, at least I hope now. Line 2 doesn't light up when someone goes, yes, you did. But I've never been someone who enjoyed kicking down, I'll always kick up. In comedy, you always kick up. And that's been my philosophy kind of in life, too. And I can't ever remember, bullying anyone. I mean, I hope I didn't. But I was probably someone who could have, if I was looking for it, stopped other kids from being bullied, because I was on the student council, and I had, I was funny, I suppose, and I had friends who were 6'2" and monsters, and
always
school,
good to have those friends.
Yeah, and school wasn't a hard time for me on that level, but we probably could have done more to stop it in the school, because we all have to police each other to a certain extent, and I think that would be something that would be a good development if that kind of challenge was thrown out there for kids who are having a great time at school, who are popular, who are the popular kids and have equity to burn there, to make sure that they let it be known that it's not acceptable, because I think the vast majority of people realize this is not acceptable, and that would go for the vast majority of kids in school as well. They don't, it's not like some switch goes off in our heads when we're adults and realize, oh, being a prick is a bad thing. I think most kids realize that.
And now, when it comes to the gay-straight alliances and the programs and the presentations that are going on in the schools, it's definitely helping people see that a lot more and more.
Oh, for sure.
If you want to follow along with Rick Mercer, you can go to rickmercer.com. He's also on every single Tuesday night on CBC. It is the Rick Mercer Report, and that's at 8 p.m. Just want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, Rick. What's on the agenda for you? What's next for you?
Well, I'm just, we're mid-season now, so we're carrying on. I'm traveling around the country doing the type of shoots that I do. It's
getting up at 12:30.
I have the best job
coffee
in the country, bar none. It's embarrassing. It's the best job in the country, and I get to travel it, and I get to meet fantastic people and put them on TV, and I love every minute of it.
It looks like you have a great time.
Oh, I have a great time. It's embarrassing, really, how much I like my job.
Well, that's awesome. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great day.
All righty, bye-bye.
Bye.